So welcome to From the Studio, a new podcast from PDM. We're talking about stories from the world of product design and much more. And today I'm delighted to welcome my co-host Richard Hall, but our special guest, Micheal Kipping. Micheal is the innovation lead for the Biomedical Catalyst at Innovate UK. And we're going to explore a few things around what that means and what it means to our potential audience. So without further ado, guys, welcome to From the Studio podcast.
Hi, great to see you both.
Good to have you on. One of the reasons we have you on as a guest, Micheal, is that Innovate UK probably touches a lot of the audience that we are looking to engage with, and we'd like to explore that really. We've called this proposed title of the podcast, Exploring the Innovate UK landscape and some of the support options you've got available for business. So I guess without further ado, shall we crack on?
Yeah, great.
Excellent. So let's start with you, Micheal. Do you want to give us a quick headline overview of Innovate UK? Perhaps for those who don't know what it's all about, how it operates and kind of the things that you get up to and services you deliver.
Sure. So Innovate UK is the UK's innovation agency. So we're part of a larger organisation called UK Research and Innovation that brought together the 7 research councils, Innovate UK and Research England, a couple of years ago. So our role is to support UK business effectively and to help us build on the world-class academic base that we have in the UK. So really, we're trying to accelerate the economy, help create jobs, and help businesses sort of navigate, the hugely complex environment that they face, especially when they're setting out.
I would suspect that you've had a few challenges along the way in the last 18 months with the pandemic throwing a few curveballs at you, but there's probably been never a better time to look at innovation and growth and coming out of it, as strong as we can really. I guess you throw in there the dreaded B word as well, don't you? It's been a perfect storm of challenge, but a good opportunity for Innovate UK to support the business environment, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's also been really insightful in terms of understanding the challenges businesses face, especially when they're trying to get products to market really quickly to meet acute needs. That's been really, really interesting alongside some of the interesting sort of products that have been in development.
Okay. I looked on your LinkedIn profile, as I have a habit of doing for our guests, Micheal, and you're described as an innovation lead in the Biomedical Catalyst. Now, that suggests 2 areas of expertise and interest: innovation, obviously, and the biomedical sector. I love a specialist rather than a generalist, to be fair. And so how much does Innovate UK drill down to that sort of specialist level when it's building the teams it builds and the support it brings to businesses?
So across Innovate UK, we cover all sectors. So there are teams that focus on space, enabling technologies, agriculture, various other sectors. And the team that I'm in is really looking at health and life sciences. So we have a team of around 15 people, all working within this space. And all of us have different levels of expertise and knowledge. So my background's really in health technology. I've worked in this area for about 20 years, including industry, research, working for the regulator, whereas some of my peers worked in, say, vaccines or diagnostics. So it's a really, really interesting blend of expertise that we have in-house. But being able to provide opportunities for all businesses is really important. So we have an open program called SMART that's open to any business, any sector. But then we also run kind of more specialist competitions for businesses within certain sectors. And one of the key things that we do at Innovate UK is provide grant funding. So this is non-dilutive funding for UK businesses to really help them de-risk their ideas.
We'll explore that a little bit shortly. Richard, let's take it from a PDM point of view. I know innovation is certainly at the heart of what PDM are all about and how we engage our particular clients. It drives a lot of the culture of the business. In fact, we call our studio an innovation studio for that reason. But as a business working with and alongside the likes of Innovate UK, how much value do you put on a structure that specialises and focuses on specialist areas rather than generalist approaches?
Yeah, good question. And the answer to that is a lot. Innovate UK, it's a fantastic organisation, which Michael mentions, government funded, and it supports all aspects of innovation. So as we know, SMEs contribute a huge amount to the UK economy. So I think that, you know, the real great thing about Innovate UK is whether you're a startup or an established business, there will be a theme that will help support your growth in terms of innovation. And as Michael mentioned, there's also the open call. So if you've not got a specific theme, they've got an open call which comes out regularly, where if you are innovating as a business, you can apply for funding.
And from our experience, that wouldn't necessarily be sector specific like a biomedical. It would be just looking at innovation and which of the catalysts and the sectors we would access for our clients then.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, there are key themes. There's a big push in terms of, you know, agri-tech and, you know, medical technologies and all of the things that are coming down the tracks, you know, for example, in Industry 4.0. But there is this catch-all of an open call, a smart award, which people can apply for. But you've got to be at the right point of the innovation journey to really have a good chance of obtaining a fund from Innovate UK. Okay.
So going back to you, Michael, you've got, obviously innovation is one of your areas, but you also cover regulation, digital health and health technology, according to your bio, as it were. I've put here some exciting areas, perhaps with the exception of regulation, but I mean, some people get excited by regulations, I guess. So what do you reckon the digital health and health technology is going to look like coming out of the pandemic? We seem to have accelerated across a lot of fronts there. You know, what's your view on digital health and health technology post-pandemic, if we can touch wood and claim that we might be at the post-pandemic point, really?
So the pandemic has been, you know, hugely challenging and, you know, deeply kind of emotionally challenging for many people, and you know, a huge challenge for the whole, you know, for the whole world. Interestingly, it's been a spur for change within our own health system, and sometimes you need, you know, quite a big challenge to actually create that environment for change. So we have seen greater use of remote patient management, remote clinics, that side of things. But actually, one of the key areas I see for our own healthcare system in the short term is actually the use of sort of digital solutions to improve workflow, efficiency, those types of areas, especially when looking at introducing advanced mathematical algorithms, you know, AI and machine learning, you know, introducing in areas where there's perhaps less cultural barriers, less concern because they're not specifically patient facing. I think we are seeing some greater strides there, but more broadly, it's brought the use of digital tools much more to the forefront of people's attention. It's brought specific areas like mental health to the forefront of people's attention, and the availability of tools to help support people. And, you know, we're only going to see more and more use of these tools and approaches in the future. In terms of challenges, having good data curation and access to data for companies is really critical. I think us as people, as patients, as communities, our role in this needs to be better defined as well. You know, it's our data ultimately. So kind of working through some of those ethical and practical challenges, I think, will be really important. But, you know, hospitals are really expensive to run. Healthcare institutions are really expensive to run. So, you know, naturally, if we can help support people to avoid illness in the first place by using some of these digital tools, and that's better for us individually, but also better for the healthcare system.
Excellent. I mean, there's been a lot of advancements, but there is, like you say, the big data point is, you know, people's perception and issues around sort of GDPR, personal information, vaccine passports, all that kind of thing. But there've been some significant advancements, I guess, over, you know, forced on us really by the circumstance of working practices that were no longer available to us during the pandemic. Richard, you, in terms of digital health and healthcare technology from a PDM point of view, we've got a lot of clients that are working on various projects across those two areas. What's your view on the state of play in sort of digital health and health technology, and how's it looking going forward?
I think that COVID has created a paradigm shift in terms of adopting technologies in digital and health technology, and overall perhaps for the better. For example, being able to have an online consultation with a GP pre-COVID had resistance. You'd always want to be in front of your GP because you felt unwell and you had that kind of personal connection. I think that online consultations is here to stay, which I believe is a good thing. However, I'm not a fan of apps for app's sake. So perhaps an example of that is track and trace, where it was a really good idea, but I think there's lessons that could be learned in terms of implementation. But as with any innovation, there needs to be a real focus on the user and their behaviour, and ultimately this will help increase the adoption of the innovation. So I think it's been a really interesting time, through COVID, and I think on balance there are good things, but we need to be very mindful of not creating apps just for the sake of an app.
I think some of the apps that were developed in response to COVID, like say track and trace, were developed. There was a political requirement for them without necessarily putting the user experience at the heart of that, and it became something of a standing joke. Really, did it from time to time. And then the pingdemic and all the things that go with that. So yeah, I think app development's important, but maybe not at the expense of looking at what the impact of that is. And we are more product than app development. There's still lots of product opportunities, isn't there, coming out of digital health and healthcare technology as well, Richard, I guess.
Yeah, so you've got, I think the really interesting thing is that digital health has really advanced, although there were, lots of kind of false starts pre-COVID. And I think that with AI that Michael mentioned, and sensing technologies and all of the really interesting maturing technologies out there, I think it's enabling us to be more patient-centered. So point of care health. So devices that enable people to understand what their health position is. So wearables, for example. I think pre-COVID there was a fair amount of resistance. So I'm interested in the next kind of few years of how that's going to disseminate, of preventing illness in the first place, but how to use technology for the better and blend it with digital health to help increase patient care. I agree in terms of going to hospital or GPs can be an expensive thing. So interesting times in terms of using technology for the right reasons for the benefit.
Okay. So Michael, going back to Innovate UK and particularly support and strategies around focusing on SMEs and startups and those kind of areas, we're in an era of uncertainty. Funding seems to have changed, and we used to have ERDF, European money, coming out of different pots, and obviously with Brexit, that's going to have a different impact. How can a business looking for support take advantage of all you've got to offer at Innovate UK? What's the best steps that they should think about taking to engage with you and you to engage with them, I guess?
So within my role, so part of my role is running a funding program called the Biomedical Catalyst, which I'll touch on in a second. And the other part is really trying to understand the challenges facing UK SMEs within the health and life sciences space. And pretty much every day, I find out about some other part of the ecosystem that I hadn't been aware of. So I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's so complex, the system. It's not necessarily a lack of support. It's sometimes there can be too much and it can be a bit overwhelming. So in terms of SMEs looking for support, I think getting some advice early on is really important. So Innovate UK is part of our family. We have an organization that we fund called KTN that's free to access, that can advise companies in terms of funding that's available, not just from Innovate UK, but other companies.
KTN, the Knowledge Transfer Network, is that right?
It is, yeah, but it's rebranded itself as KTN.
Okay, cool. Is that cooler? Does that make it sound cooler?
Yeah, because we're short on acronyms apparently. So yeah, formerly known as Knowledge Transfer Network.
Okay.
So that's free to access and a good port of call. They've got a good website that highlights funding opportunities from various sources. But starting out, if you have a new idea, get some advice. Get some advice around what the regulatory pathway could look like for your product, because it's much better to do that early on than go down a path and spend lots of cash and then realize that you've missed bits out. Get some advice in terms of your product development. So, really before spending lots of money developing products, try and make sure you're on the right track first. Speaking
our language there, Richard, I guess, isn't it, in terms of, making sure you're not remortgaging your house or selling an organ to fund something that hasn't got commercial value in the end game. And PDM are at the heart of that with our clients, and also access to funding options and advising and pointing people in the right direction. So it's good to see that we're on the same page there, really. Again, Michael, in terms of innovation in particular, how do you see the relationships between the likes of Innovate UK, academics you mentioned earlier, other similar bodies you mentioned, KTN, the wider business community, and indeed people like PDM as a specialist innovation studio? How do you see them working together and supporting the regional and national agenda?
So the reason the UK is such a strong, so strong in terms of health and life sciences, and the government has said in its Build Back Better document and the Department for Business Innovation strategy that health and life sciences is a core pillar of the UK economy and is a key focus area. And part of the reason for that is that we have such a strong ecosystem. We do have a really strong academic base. We do have a strong health, provider base. We have great companies like PDM and businesses that do IP and regulatory affairs and various other things. So we have a strong ecosystem, which is really key. But from an Innovate perspective, our role is really to focus primarily on the cash and how we can provide that part of the jigsaw. So we do work closely with academia and with innovators from healthcare settings as well, and try and provide support for them at really early stage development, where they need a bit of cash, but they also need support. They might need support from people like you. They might need support just in terms of how to set up a business. Whereas the later stage they get, and for closer they get to the market, then the relationship changes, and then the relationship with the NHS, for instance, might change where they want to do clinical trials, for instance. So we have relationships across the whole spectrum, the whole continuum of innovation, right from sort of feasibility and translational research right through to market, and then beyond as well. So we also have very good links to the Department for International Trade, for instance, and trade bodies. So that's really, really important, because innovation is a multidisciplinary, collaborative effort. It's not about kind of one organization to deliver. It has to be that sort of collaborative approach.
Okay, thank you. It's a great answer, by the way, very detailed and interesting to see the level and scale of relationships you got to plug into for that collaboration. So, Richard, question for you, really, I guess, from a PDM point of view. We support innovation and product development as well as part of that journey. Where would you say an organisation like a PDM fits into the particular landscape that Michael's just outlined?
It's always good to get involved in the early stages of an innovation. I think the most important thing is that the innovation has got to have substance in the first place. Lots of people have good ideas, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be innovative or be commercially effective. So if we can work with and collaborate early, it means that we can look for points of weakness. So something that we do talk a lot about is fail fast, fail cheap. So it's not to say that we want to kill an idea outright, it's just to look for points of weakness and therefore de-risk the innovation from the outset. innovating is very much a specialist subject, and it's really important to have the right team from the very start. So in answer to your question, the ideal in terms of a product journey starts with a client who is happy to be challenged and embrace change. I think if people have, a startup or an SME have an idea and they've got this fixation in their mind that this is going to be, it's not going to change to being commercially viable, that can be a dangerous place to be. Innovation, as we know, has got many, many pitfalls. So it needs to be seen as a collaboration, and innovation not as an add-on in that journey.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people will potentially come to the table, either Michael's table or your table, with a pretty fixed idea that they've got something ready-made really, and all they're looking for is a little bit of direction support, or maybe a bit of manufacturing or drawings or whatever it might be. And in reality, it's never been challenged, that idea, has it? So that idea becomes fixed in their mind and difficult to take them off course. Michael, it's a question for you, I guess. How would you deal with that, with somebody who comes with a fairly fixed idea that their innovation, their product, their app, their sort of digital health solution is the next best thing, and really it might not be? How do you deal with that?
So I tend to come across these companies and project ideas through the funding program that I run, so the Biomedical Catalyst. Now, despite its name, the Biomedical Catalyst is technology agnostic, and we cover everything from gene therapies to diagnostics, digital health, medtech, literally everything and anything. So we get to see a real range of projects and companies in there. The way I guess we deal with this is in that for every application that comes into us, we have it assessed by 5 independent non-Innovate UK assessors that look at the project, look at the 10 questions that we ask. And for the larger sums of money that we distribute, we also have a Dragon's Den style panel that's made up of investors, of clinicians, sometimes academics, but people that have kind of been through the loop many, many times and kind of understand what it's like.
I'm assuming they're not sat with a pile of cash on the desk as crass as they are in the sort of Dragon's Den, though. It's not quite the same environment as that.
Sadly not, no. But in terms of the recommendations they're making, typically we have, for the competition that we have that closed recently, we have £18 million available. So that panel will be deciding how that money's spent. So it's not an insignificant amount of cash. And kind of one of the interesting things that we see is that obviously there's always a written assessment as part of any Innovate UK program. It's part of most grant funding programs. You have to put in a written application. And we are seeing more and more use of grant writers, which is fine. It's perfectly legitimate. But actually, when you see some of the companies turn up and stand up in front of the panel, sometimes it kind of falls apart because perhaps they haven't been as engaged in the grant writing process as others may have been. So again, a key part of this is the people that deliver it, because you can have a great idea, you can have a great commercial idea, but you need the team, you need that leadership and that broader team that can deliver as well. And going to Richard's point, certainly the companies that we see right at feasibility, the team changes, the skills they need change, and having that open mindset that Richard mentioned is absolutely key, both in terms of the team and approach, but also the idea. Okay.
Richard, anything to add to that? I mean, we like to be involved early. We like to assess the team and things. What's your view on having those awkward conversations?
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, we like to work with clients that have got ambition and motivation and an average idea, as opposed to, the opposite. A company's got a killer idea but just not got the motivation. I think there's a lot to be said about this in terms of people being prepared for what innovation actually is. It's a real journey, and it's got lots of pitfalls and part of it is the resilience of the team behind it, to be aware that this is not going to be a straight line from A to B, where they're going to make lots of cash. And I think part of it is to forewarn anybody that wants to innovate that this is going to be probably one of the hardest journeys that you're going to have. I think the other aspect is groupthink, where you get a bunch of people that all think the same way and almost are kind of hoodwinking themselves into thinking that they are further down the technology readiness than they actually think. So a lot of what we do is to filter people and give them a bit of a reality check in terms of, it's not just the idea that will make it a success. That is a percentage, but there's a whole lot more around it just than that.
Okay. Well, Michael, final question for you, really. What are the ambitions for Innovate UK for the back end of 2021 and into 2022? You're starting to look at 2022 strategy at the moment and budgets and plans and things. What does the landscape look like for you going forward?
So we're in a wonderful process at the moment and planning for spending review. So we're looking at trying to get a settlement for the next 3 years for Innovate UK. So we're in a process of submitting our plans to Innovate UK for really where we'd like to spend some money. So continuing the program that we currently have is a key priority. We do envisage some changes to it to make it easier to navigate for innovators and to potentially bring in an investor partnerships element to it as well. But we absolutely plan to continue with that program if the funding is made available. But also, we're also looking at other areas. And, earlier on, Nick, you mentioned about regulation and about it sort of perhaps not being the most exciting area.
Well, I was alluding to the fact that for most people, it's not probably top of our priority list to get excited about, but it's important, isn't it?
It is. And if we had more time, I would kind of relish the opportunity to try and make it sound exciting. But that's an area where we are looking to focus as well, because by providing clarity for innovators in terms of what a pathway looks like, what the evidence requirements look like, and therefore what the timescales and costs look like, that would be really, really helpful. And there is a lot of uncertainty at the moment. So those sorts of challenges, helping innovators navigate kind of regulatory pathways and trying to align the development paths for a new emerging technology in the regulatory environment is really, really important. So very quickly, if we look at AI, for instance, AI has been around since the late 1950s, and yet we're in 2021 and we're still scratching our head as to how we regulate this, not just for health, but for driverless cars and various other things. So there's some really interesting opportunities in there, and I'll save that for another time.
Okay, we might get you on to prove with a regulatory issue. Half an hour podcast on regulatory issues. We might not, but it's been great. Listen, Michael, that's been fantastic to have you on. Richard, thank you for inviting Michael. We just put some details on as a holding slide. We have been from the studio, PDM International Podcast. We are PDM based in Thirsk, North Yorkshire, and also on the platform at the New Station Street in Leeds. Contact details are at the end of the podcast from there. But all that remains for me to say is, Michael and Richard, thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for being fantastic guests and co-hosts, and we'll hopefully see you again very soon.
Thanks a lot. Great chatting to you both.